Hello, good evening and welcome to you all. Uh,
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Dr. Rakesh Chandra, sir. Good evening. Good evening, sir.
गुड इवनिंग
कैसे हैं सर?
मैं ठीक
Good evening and welcome to you all. Today we have the conclave on gender roles and adolescence. And for today's session, Professor Rakesh Chandra, Dean Academics of Lucknow University and Head of Department of Philosophy will chair the session. And as you know, that the conclave is an outcome of a national research paper contest that we started in January, and we have got more than 600 papers. After that, we segregated into different subjects, and the papers related to social sciences were judged by a panel of, I think, eight judges, and the 4 present in our conclave are one of them. So there are, I think, 136 papers in social sciences. Out of those, we have around 32 have been selected as the best prize winners. The papers related to gender and adolescence will be presented today. And let me introduce you the judges and the speakers. The panelists here are the session will be chaired by Professor Rakesh Chandra, Dean Academics, Lucknow University. And the other panelists are Dr. Vinod Chandra, sir. He is Head of Department of Sociology in JNPG College and Associate Editor of Young Journal of SAGE. We have Dr. Amita Marwa of Isabella Thoburn College and Dr. Lavi Srivastav, ma'am. She'll join soon. She's in the meeting with the university. She is in OP Jindal University. Now let me introduce you to the presenters today. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
The finalists in this category are Seher Salim of Aligarh Muslim University, Moda Tariq of Lady Shri Ram College for Women, University of Delhi, Anand Ranjan of Jawaharlal Nehru University, Srishti Mondal of Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, IIT Delhi, Mrinal Datiwal, Rajiv Gandhi National University of Law, Nikhil Meena from the same college, Rajiv Gandhi National University of Law, Punjab, Devesh Badolia, Rajiv Gandhi National University of Law, Punjab. These 3 are the co-authors in the paper. We have Sahiba Khan, GL Bajaj Institute of Technology and Management, Noida. We have K. Prashanti, IIT Kharagpur. Kanuvanti V. Reddy, Chaitanya Degree College, Telangana. Isha Gotewal, Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh. Sadka Sultan, Department of English, Aligarh Muslim University. Ghazal Khan, Aligarh Muslim University. A paper by Zainab Fatima and 2 of her co-authors. She's from Aligarh Muslim University. Her co-author Urusa Anwar from the same university, and Hayat Fatima, the other co-author, Aligarh Muslim University. Animesh Singh from Department of Computer Science and Engineering, IIT Delhi, and her co-author Sukriti Gupta from the same department in IIT Delhi. Palak Singh from Banaras Hindu University. And the last paper is Zahia Naqvi from APJ Abdul Kalam Institute of Forensic Sciences and Criminology, Bundelkhand University. And her co-author Anu Singla and Sabah Rashid from the same department, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam Institute of Forensic Sciences and Criminology in Bundelkhand University. So let me welcome you all, and I think Amita ma'am is here.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Now I transfer the baton to you, so you can
Thank
call one by one
Yes.
in serial, and they will present their papers.
Oh, thank you. It's my honor and a privilege to start this session today. It's a session on gender and adolescence. Before starting the session, I would like to welcome Sir Rakesh Chandra. Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir. Vinod Chandra, sir, is here. Zulfi?
Vinod Chandra sir will join in 30
All right.
minutes.
Okay. And Lavi ma'am will also join later on, right? Right? Okay. So with your permission, sir, Rakesh Chandra, sir, can we start the session now? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. So let me call the first participant first. The rules are very simple. Please keep the presentation within the time limit, and the time limit is 10 minutes. So it's a request from all the participants. Please adhere with the time limit because it is very important, as everybody is sitting over here in the very difficult and unprecedented time. And even sir has given us a time between, and when Zulfi told me that it's going to last till 8 o'clock, and I was like, okay, let me handle this. So, sir, with your permission, I'm going to ask the first presenter. Okay, thank you. So, the first presenter is Seher Salim. Is Seher here?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Good evening,
Our paper
everyone.
is on Good evening, darling. Representation of voicelessness of the maids through subaltern perspective. What a beautiful, beautiful topic. I hope the paper also goes the same way. Let's start, Seher.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, I am sharing my PPT.
Please go ahead.
Give me 1 minute, ma'am.
Yeah.
Is my PPT visible or not?
No.
It's not visible yet.
Okay, okay. Is my PPT visible?
Not yet. Can you do one thing? Then Zulfi, can you send it to Zulfi? Maybe he can share. Can we do that, Zulfi? If in case it's not sharing with your device.
Hello, Salim. Seher, please try again.
Okay, sir. I would like to give oral presentation. Can I do this?
Oral presentation, yes, it's fine. But just try once more, as Zulfi is saying. Okay.
Yes, you please try once again, because it was not
probably
allowed.
from his
now I have
end.
given
Yes.
permission.
Yeah.
Okay, sir.
Now it's sharing. Yeah.
Okay. Is this visible?
Yes, we can see. Yeah, representation.
Okay.
Please go
My
ahead.
name is Seher. I am from Aligarh Muslim University, and my presentation topic is representation of voicelessness of the maids in the current scenario. So the present paper analyzes the voicelessness of the maids through subaltern perspective. This paper is important because of the current COVID scenario, and life of maid is very difficult at this time. This paper shows their subalternity, These maids are under the marginalized group. The intent of this study is to gain information from marginalized group. This academic paper attempts to explore and expose the constant forces that molds the Indian maids into weaker, voiceless shadows. Subaltern studies is considered as a powerful tool for molding opinions. In the current society where we live, the lower class are mostly neglected. No one respects them, especially those who are working at rich people's houses as maids. This study deals with the prevailing practices of giving food and water in separate utensils to our maids. The paper basically deals with the circumstances of poor maids, which is also one of the elements of subaltern perspective. Subaltern perspective stands for understanding the society through condition of pupil. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, sir, you are very much audible, Vikas. Go ahead.
Okay. Understanding the society through condition of pupil belonging to different class, gender, etc. Can the subaltern speak has been essentially seminal in deconstructing the and post-colonial and has been widely cited, invoked, and critiqued. Spivak's conclusion of this essay by posing the titular question, can the subaltern speak? No, because the framework which works to provide an agency to subaltern are essentially Eurocentric and predominantly Western. Why this subaltern approach is important? This approach gives immense possibility to analyze the lives of people, institutions, and their problems. Its main objective is to retake the history for those people whose voices that has not been heard. The main important aspect of the subaltern studies is to identify the groups of the community who are subalterns and need to address their unheard voice. Being the student of literature, I think it is important to take the ground problem that is related to our society. Life of mate is hard. Despite this, they always strive to better for their masters. They hardly complain about their issues or the exploitation they face by their masters. Subaltern history will have to lay bare previously covered histories, hidden secrets of past. It identifies those people or groups who are out from the center of society. In her article, Can the Subaltern Speak? Spivak pointed out that the subaltern is always represented by others who speak on her behalf, suggesting that subalternity is endowed with a certain degree of voicelessness. It is important to study what happens among the masses of the society at the very basic level. Subaltern studies is not only confined to literature, but in our country, it becomes the essential academic field. It also becomes the part of today's debate and also the vast subject of discussion. In my opinion, history is objective and unable to show the real picture of those groups or the community who are considered as voiceless. These people are not represented effectively and appropriately. When I was child, my perception about history was that it shows a real picture of the society, but I denied this statement as now because history writing not deal about what great men in particular society say or do, but history should also emphasize on the unheard voices. Subaltern study seeks to uncover the silences and the anxieties of groups or communities. Families keep separate utensils for their mates in order to show their status. The problem of our society is that they provide the separate utensils for their mates, but eat that food which they cook. Mates reveal that they cannot ask this question that why they are giving separate utensils to us. Because if they ask this question, they can lose their jobs. These families can remove them from working. Borders between, I quote from Tripti Lyry book, that is, border between classes are marked out where you may sit, where you may go to the washroom, and where with whom you may eat. The socio-economic power relations that shape domestic work intersect with socio-culture makers of difference and hierarchy that define workers are subordinate. They are generally known as maids. They are not known by their names. She has a label name as maid that the identity of maid is lost. The main aspect of this paper is to show how we look at the society and what our worldview towards any particular issues. Today, the scope of subaltern studies is vast and broad because of this challenging nature as it challenges the existing historical documents, and from this notion it has a great impact on the other literary disciplines. Some of the families give broken utensils and spoil food and made strict norms like do not touch that item, this item. Why do we all not think that they wash our clothes, utensils, dishes with the same hand, but still we give separate utensils for food? The employer maintains physical and ritual distance from one of distance. From one of the maid, child reveals that she feels bad when their ma'am sahib give food to different utensils. One of the main issue of maid is the issue of job security. There's no job security. They can be denied work, pay without any notice. They become voiceless at this stage. The main problem is that they are doing their work carefully, but it depends on the mentality of their employer that they will work in their house or not. They do not have any fixed number of holidays, and if they do not come at workplaces due to some reason, household lord answer, I will cut off your money. Sick leave is dependent on the goodwill of the employer. Most important problem is consider with their work is most important problem is considered with underpayment. Most of the people view that their work is not a real work. It is considered as unproductive work. The other discrimination which is based on caste ground. Upper caste women are employed in works like cooking, and lower class women are employed in cleaning washroom. Domestic workers in India are migrant workers. These workers like organic link to the place where they work. They also rendered even more vulnerable. One of the foremost problem of the maid, some of them easily accept whatever their ma'am size pay and also are under constant fear that if she asks more, they can terminate them. Families give spoiled food because we are not consider them as human beings, but machines who is always available whenever we need. The household do not provide extra wages for more workload. Sometimes they force them to do that work which is not a part of the regular duties. The worst reality is that, which I find that the worst reality is that every year we celebrate Women's Day with full of energy and discussions take place about the respect of women. We usually talk about the respect at home and also at the workplace. But my question is that why we all forget about the respect of women. We usually talk about giving respect to the lady who comes daily to our houses to do cleaning, washing utensils. They need respect. Many people give food in different plates just because they are just maids. We should give food in the same plate in which we eat so that the future generation will aware about this practice, and maybe they can change their mentality. They just need to change our worldview towards these people. We should stop this practice of giving separate utensils and encourage our neighbors, our friends to stop this practice as far as possible so that every family will give the same plates in which they eat to their mates. It will provide their respect and dignity. There's need to forward our opinions and views and also focus on the unheard voices. Subaltern writing deals with deliberate prejudiced opinion on the others of the society. So it is an important weapon which gives consciousness among the society. There were movements started which was based on ethnicity, race, language, and this demonstrates the inefficiency about historical writing that shows only the history about the elite and excluded the masses and the subordinate community. My main concern on this paper is that why our mates never ask that why we are giving them separate utensils. Somewhere in the heart, she feels bad for this treatment, but she can't ask this question because of the fear that if she asks this question, what will be the reaction of Ma'am Sahib? So during the COVID pandemic, most of the maids have lost their jobs and they have not been paid salaries. They become jobless. Household asked their maids to stop coming to work because they had a fear that they might be carrier of COVID-19. People were not listening and understanding their problem, their pathetic conditions. Some have given half salary and others have not given any salary. So I'm going to give some recommendations that I find most important. First one is that the condition of the subaltern is more pathetic. Maid suffers in the name of gender, class, and caste. We should reduce their pathetic conditions. We should aware them about their basic rights. Second is brick about change is obviously not easy after centuries of the outdated Malik knocker dynamic. Many people work as service staff have conditioned to follow unsaid rules. Let's try to remove words like knocker and kamwali from our vocabulary. We can do this. Doesn't matter if it is a maid, they are serving us in exchange of money. It is a simple economic thing that should ideally be justice that we can at least treat them with the same dignity you do show another human being. We should stop this practice of giving separate utensils to maids, provide dignity and honor. Now I am going to conclude my presentation. So my conclusion is that segregation is very much there regarding the matter of maid. It is clear that hierarchical and social relation that is based on the discrimination of casteism is to dictate the master and servant relationship. Maids occupy lower status irrespective of their caste background has been instrumental in them by subjective to discrimination based on the notion of pollution and purity. More awareness should be imparted. Subaltern studies is broadly influential academic movement whose goal is to refocus history on the unique role of subaltern or marginalized people in bringing about large state transformation in the society. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. The paper is not only pointing out to the dignity, the human right. This is the basic human right.
Yes, ma'am.
Dignity is the basic human right, and I appreciate you have brought up the topic. Thank you, sir.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Now I would like to call upon the next participant. Is Muda Tariq here? Muda, can you hear
Yes,
me?
ma'am.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. The topic is changing representation of women in India, soap operas, post new economic reforms. Yes, Muda, please go ahead. But see to it that you stick with the time limit. Okay, Bitu?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll have to switch off my video, my internet. I'll be going for an oral presentation. The paper title is Changing Representation.
I will appreciate if you can switch off your camera, Amita. Can you do that? Is it okay with you?
Yeah, switch off my camera.
okay.
Am I audible to you?
Yeah, you're on. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for this opportunity, Dr. Madhva, and everybody on the panel. So my paper is titled Changing Representation of Women in Indian Soap Operas Post New Economic Reforms. New economic reforms of 1991 led to unprecedented growth of satellite television, and with it, there was a change in the portrayal of women in television soap operas. A woman's body was not just a silent site of violence, abuse, and othering, but then it also became a locale for constructing modernity. Globalization in the Indian context can be perceived as an amalgam of social, cultural, and economic outcomes resulting from the opening up of the Indian economy. Therefore, globalization and economic liberalization are the two aspects of the same process. In the global south, countries such as India, Mexico, Brazil, China, television audiences increased substantially in the 1980s. By 2002, almost an estimated 40 plus million households in India had access to cable and satellite channels, providing the audience with a wide range of choices. With the localization of Star Plus in 1996, Hindi shows were broadcasted from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. By 1999, Star Plus also became a Hindi channel that broadcasted that it completely, because it was a global company, it completely localized and became a Hindi channel that broadcasted television soaps and reality shows. Thus, in third world countries, before the processes of globalization and liberalization were initiated, soap operas had the sole purpose of abetting the notion of development. This was largely inspired by the Mexican experience, which broadcasted the first pro-development television soap opera, Ven Conmigo, Come With Me, which aimed to promote adult literacy. Then, because of its success, the Mexican government broadcasted another show which was successful in persuading 500,000 Mexicans to visit public family clinics and youth contraceptives. So, in the pre-globalized India, there was a large range of serials that focused on different areas. For example, shows like Hum Log, Bunyad, they were based on the lifestyle of middle-class families, whereas there were also serials like Ramayana, Mahabharata, which were mythological in nature. The television soap operas before the new economic policy emphasized the issues of gender inequality as well. Media had was an educational tool and a means to inform and create a feeling of national identity and to forge national unity. As per various researchers, the television serials before the globalized India disseminated very powerful messages pertaining to the emancipation of women. What we see in the post-liberalization, the role changes from being primary producer of culture and national discourses to taking a back seat and playing a marginal role. Therefore, the India of the 90s, that is the post-liberalization India, has been described as stately as vibrant, liberal, assertive, and sexy. The emergence of new TV channels in the post-economic liberalization period also represent a change in the representation of women. The modifications in the representation have to be understood in relation to the deregulation policies that were adopted by the state. The important point that has to be noted is the paradoxical relationship between liberalization policies and the representation of women. Although post-liberalization, women had greater opportunities, their representation was put in a manner that glorified the national patriarchal image of a good Indian woman, it overshadowed the success and benefits that pre-liberalization in the pre-liberalization period that the women had gained. Thus, it focused on women's problems. Unlike the previous, it didn't focus much on women's problems and the issues of gender inequality. The reason for the success of television soaps in India is the fact that these serials are made up in socio-cultural context, which the mainstream audience can resonate with. The audiences do not view individuals as characters in an isolated space, but as people webbed in various social institutions such as family, caste, class, religion, and as professionals. In a cultural setup where women have personified the Indian cherished values, one way in which the media houses sold their content was representing these values through regulating women's sexuality. As Partha Chatterjee also talks about, there has been a dichotomy between Ghar and Bahar, that is, public and the private household. It was during the colonial rule when this discourse was shaped, and the outer domain was largely unaffected by the liberal policies that British brought in, but the inner private domain, it was where the traditional patriarchy got reinforced. This kind of distinction was also visible in the television soap post 1990s. The serials gained popularity among the masses by glorifying these Indian values of the private domain. On one hand, the nationalist aim was to keep India at par with the Western world, but on the other, it glorified the Indian household values, which resisted the patriarchal change in the inner domain. In the household, women play an integral role in producing the ideology of the nation. In the TV series, they did the same by valorizing the ideal roles of mother, wife, etc. As there were drastic changes in the Indian economy, there was also felt a need to protect the inner culture of home. The television soaps, thus the products of liberalization and privatization, they created a narrative in which women primarily focused on family and home. Thus, the Indian television has been largely a female bastion. Women have been serving both as protagonists and key targets for advertisers. Earlier, Hindi soap operas such as Tare, Hasrate, Saas, Aurat, Shanti, they portrayed women in various roles, but not limited to that of a wife, mother, and homemaker. These shows covered a wide range of topics, including women's issues such as divorce, extramarital relationships, sexual harassment, rape, abortion, and most importantly, what it portrayed was women fighting and asserting their rights. Later, the shows such as Kahani Gar Gar Ki, Kusum, Kasoti Zindagi Ki, they explore the notions of sexuality, violence, and conflict, but the primarily local, and it dealt with the typical Indian issues that Indian women face. However, the post-liberal liberalization television series are controversial as they reinforce stereotypes women represent the ways in which things they should be doing in the husband's home. The soaps end up portraying that women have no world of their own, as their families are absent from the plot, and once they've entered their marital home, that's all it matters. It mostly it's shown at the crossroads between struggling to maintain and renew its traditional values, and at the same time strive for modernity. This portrayal of family as undergoing transition, but the only accessible transition is the one that reasserts the traditional family without altering the familiar structures of power and gender. Feminists have regarded these soaps as a medium of socializing and an ideological tool for reinforcing the public's grounded traditional bearings and to some extent legitimizing traditional behaviors and attitudes towards women. The portrayal of female characters ranges from authoritative, such as the mother-in-law, the evil, scheming, and manipulative, but she's also submissive to the patriarch. It often uses this concept of empowerment.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Oda. Can we have a conclusion now, Vita?
Sorry?
Can you conclude now, Vita?
Okay.
Okay.
So in the conclusion, the paper tries to draw a nexus between liberalization and the representation of women. In the pre-liberalization period, we've seen that the soaps were family-oriented, not just in their content, but also in their viewership. Thus, to combat the Western influence of love, sexuality, and individuality, Indian soaps began churning out the image of a modern Indian woman who was strong and independent, but this identity was centered on her marital life. Thus, the representation of women in these serials got modified. The earlier shows depicted the realist struggles of women in the patriarchal setup and the ways in which gender inequality affected them. Whereas post-liberalization, it devalued women and glorified consumerism. In such a transnational frame, traditional stereotypes of gender got reproduced and also fused with modernity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mada. I think you brought up a very important topic. Post-reform, it's not just post-reform. I think the Indian television owes a lot to women because the portrayal of the women has been very stereotyped. So I think it's high time that we show women with all the substance and what she really is, instead of showing her either as a perfect person or either as someone who's just sticking with the stereotypes and the biases of the society. She has to be shown as someone who has the courage to come out of that box. So thank you. That was very nice, Muda.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I wanted to ask that what is the standard practice regarding the camera? Do we need to switch it on during presentation, or we have to?
Well,
switch
we'll
it?
appreciate if you're going to present. Do you have a PPT right now?
No, ma'am.
So is it a problem? If you're comfortable, only then switch on the camera.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
There is
Thank you,
no
ma'am.
hassle there.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
So yeah, Minal Dwivedi is here. Minal and Devesh.
But ma'am, I am interrupting, ma'am, please.
Go ahead.
I request all of you, if there is any reason, then only you can switch off your camera. But if you are presenting the paper, please switch on your camera while presentation. That will be much better, and in videography also it helps. Thanks a lot.
Zulfi is very worried about videography right now. So it's fine. If you're not comfortable, you can bear, but we'll appreciate if you can turn. Okay.
Yes,
So
ma'am. Thank you.
Here. Is Minal here? Minal Dwivedi? Is he here? Minal Dwivedi and Divesh, Nikhil, anyone? Because we have a paper written by 3 people here. I don't think any of them are present right now. So I'm moving on right now with the next presenter. And that is marital rape. I think that's the topic of the next presenter.
Yes, ma'am.
It's Caridula. Yes, it's
Yes,
Caridula. Am I pronouncing it right, Peter?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Caridula Prashanti.
Okay.
Ma'am,
Caridula
am I
Prashanti.
audible? Am I audible?
Yes, you are very much audible. The topic, her topic is marital rape, living with the rapist. Yes, please go ahead. Are you going to
Ma'am, I
present?
want to share my screen. Yes, ma'am. Can I turn off my video if it's okay?
Only then it is possible.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Ma'am, is my PPT visible?
Yes, it's very much.
Yes. A pleasant good evening to the respected panelists and all my fellow participants. First, I would like to thank Mindshare Yuva for launching the Young Scholars 2021 research paper competition, thereby providing us a great platform to exhibit our talent. I am Prashanti and I'm here to present our paper on marital rapes, living with a rapist. Since time immemorial, marital rape has been the outcome of a deep-rooted patriarchal mindset of the society. Women are still seen as inferior to males and are frequently viewed solely as the object of sexual pleasure. I would like to highlight 2 dohas of the great Sant Kabir Das that emphasize my points. Nari kaho ke nari, नख सिक्स के ये खाए, जल भुरा तो उपराय, भाग भुरा भी जाए. नारी मदन थला भरी, भाव सागर की पाल, नर मच्छा के खाने, जीवत मंडी चाल. By these dohas, Sant Kabir Das has also clearly highlighted the point that how a woman is only seen as an object for sexual pleasure and is good for nothing else. Back to our presentation, like why we have chosen this topic. Marriage, which is often regarded as pavitra rishta and the bond of birth to birth, has become a license to husbands to commit serious crimes on their wives. Many of us are unaware of this ghastly act's serious consequences. And our small effort by writing this paper is to alter this kind of mindset and educate society about all the battered women who are victims of marital rape and whose voices have been muted owing to the frequently used term by the society like log kya kahenge. But this is high time to overcome all this kind of phrases and find a solution to stop this ghastly act. Now I would I would want to discuss the causes of this act. Before that, I want to mention like we have conducted two surveys, one in a government school and at a small village in our state Telangana, and asked some of our married friends, and the findings of our studies are mentioned in our paper also. And not only this, we have included some of the real life incidents of the people who we knew also. So now I'll talk about the causes of this act, which I had drawn the conclusion from my friends. So first of is the dominance. When any kind of disagreement between the spouses increases, the husband may try to assert himself by forcing himself upon the women, his wife. Sexual dissonance. Usually, sexual dissonance between the couple happens when the woman may not be interested in sex for best reasons she know and may refuse her husband. So when the man is denied sex, he treats it as an absolute insult to his manhood. And there may be certain family factors also, like has grown up in an environment where he has seen his father enacting the same behavior with his mother, the chances of him immaculating the same like his father will be much greater. And hypermasculinity. Like according to a study, these Mako men were more likely to believe in wifely duties, and they think that this force in such kind of marital rapes is perfectly justified. And some other reasons include alcohol addiction of the husband. Even in the pandemic days, there has been continuous lockdown, so even that can be a reason. And also the financial dependency of wife on her husband prevents her from opposing this act. So she has to be a obedient and bichari wife sometimes. Next, the consequences. Coming to the consequences, the most common physical problems these marital rape victims face is low body mass index, followed by anemia, back pain, joint pains, fractures, and severe gynecological problems like menstrual abdominal pain, abnormal vaginal discharge, and sometimes it can even lead to infertility in women. And also there are psychological problems like going to depression, low self-esteem, guilt, shame, and they even develop a negative feeling towards sex and men. Now let's see this marital rape offense in a constitutional perspective. These marital rapes, though there is an exception under clause 2 of section 375 of Indian Penal Code, which immunizes husband from being prosecuted, this clearly defeats the spirit of section 375 because the purpose of section 375 IPC is to protect women and punish those who engage in the inhuman activity of rape. However, exempting husbands from punishment is entirely contradictory to that objective, and the consequences of rape are the same whether a woman is married or unmarried. The consequences are same. Moreover, a married woman may find it more difficult to escape abusive conditions at home because they are legally and financially tied to their husbands. And next, it clearly violates Article 14 because like marital rape um, violates the right to equality as the exception creates two classes of women based on their marital status and immunizes actions which are perpetrated by men against their wives. And also the Article 21 rights, which include the rights to health, privacy, dignity, safe living conditions, and safe environment. Uh, this also violates Article 21 because there is no kind of like even the right of privacy is declined and it violates all these kind of rights. So finally, coming to the solution to stop this act from happening. So like, how can we ace this problem? How can we solve this problem? In our technological age, youngsters learn about sex through the internet or through their friends. The information they obtain from these sources may be either incomplete or sometimes it can be incorrect also. And in our opinion, uh, to for like to tell the solution, I suggest like the school itself should hold workshops to eliminate sex myths And children should be taught in depth about sexual abuse. They must educate them how to save themselves if they are caught, like the schools must educate the children to save themselves if they are caught in a rape situation. And they should understand exactly what the meaning of consent for having a sex is. The government has an essential role also in altering this society as well. And advertisements, which play a prominent role, should raise public awareness about the need of sex education too. By organizing some kind of women welfare programs and thereby getting women educated also, we can encourage women to tackle every obstacle coming on the way in her life with ease and spirit. Thereby, the progress of the nation also can take place. And we can even create more safe areas like women's cells and other asylums. Then proper legal provisions can also be incorporated, because the constitution should contain strict laws which punish the crime of marital rape. But this itself is not enough, because some may misuse the law and trap the innocent men, and sometimes even men can be a victim of domestic violence and marital rapes also. So proper provisions should be incorporated so that this kind of issues does not arise. Each law may be misused by some in the society, and I'm not telling there is nothing like that, it is there, by using some kind of loopholes in it. Seeing this, we cannot step backward in lawmaking. Proper care and amendment should be done to make the law best suited for the Indian society. And the other best way to prevent this crime from happening is the proper upbringing of the children by parents. When the child is taught how to give respect to others and how to treat other human beings with respect, and when he knows the differentiation between what is good and what is wrong, then I'm sure he will be raised as a good citizen. And even though the saying might be old, but bending a sapling is easier than a tree. So we must adhere to that. And finally, I would like to conclude by one doha. नारी नरक न जानिए सब संतान की कान जामे हरिजन उपजाए सोई रतन की खान. Do not think of women as hell. She is the gold mine of all saints. It's women who give birth to the men of God, and the women are the mine of jewels. So I request all of you to say a big no to marital rapes. Thank you.
Thank you, Garudala, and thank you for bringing up such an important issue.
Thank you.
Now, I'm going to invite our next participant. Is Monica is here? Monica? Her paper is on an analysis of women's education in India. Is she here? Monica? Monica, can you hear me? Zulfi, I think we can note down these names and we can call them afterwards if they turn up, right?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Anand Rajan. Anand is here?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Anand. His topic is Becoming a Housewife, Social Construction of the Role of Women in our Global Capitalist System. And he has written this paper along with Shrishti Munda. So
Yes,
please
ma'am.
go ahead, Anand.
Okay, I'm just sharing my screen. Is my screen visible?
Not yet. Is it visible? No, not yet.
Just a second.
No, it's not.
I'm not allowed to share, ma'am.
Okay, Zulfi, can you do something about this?
Ma'am, what happened, ma'am?
He's saying I'm not allowed to share.
Share option is not clicking actually, ma'am.
Achha.
In that case, you can share that PPT, or
You can
I'll
give
share
it
it
to.
from my side.
Zulfi, you have that PPT, or should he send it to you?
Zulfi, good evening. Good evening to all of you. I am here, Vinod
Good
Chandra. I am
evening, sir.
listening you.
Good evening, sir.
Hello,
Good
sir.
evening, sir.
Hello,
Good evening,
hello.
sir.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Nice to see you, sir.
In that case,
Good
ma'am,
evening, sir.
ma'am, you can go to the next person, and
Okay,
in the
I will.
meantime, you send me your
Yes.
email. You email me
Ah.
your PPT. I'll share it from your behalf.
Okay,
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 Anand,
okay. Sure,
just
sure,
do
sure,
that,
sure,
okay?
sure, sure.
Okay. So moving on to the next presenter. Our next presenter is Sahiba Khan. Is Sahiba here? Sahiba?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Okay. Her topic is menstrual hygiene and impact on equality. Go ahead, Sahiba.
Okay, ma'am. Is my screen visible?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay. Good evening, dignitaries. I, Saiba Khan, will be presenting my paper titled Menstrual Hygiene and Impact on Ecology. The problematic effect of non-biodegradable problematic effect of non-biodegradable sanitary products are widely overlooked as they're considered medical grade plastic, but they are eminently contributing to the landfills. The paper is focused upon identifying the route of opting of non-biodegradable options and all the potential replacements so in order to reduce the impact on ecology. The early work included analyzing and searching all the facets that are included for causing all these for people for picking these options. So they included effectiveness, availability, usability, health hazards, polluting factors, market acceptabilities. It is majorly constituted. It is majorly constituted by educating on different aspects through an informative website called VHUG, and then later followed by taking a survey. Now I'll be showing my paper where I'll be putting you through the analysis that I have made. Here I'll be showing you the graphs to frame better understanding. So here we can clearly see that 87.7% of people are choosing regular sanitary napkins that are basically 90% plastic. And that is a lot of, if we constitute for every woman in India who supposedly uses, then it is a lot of pollution that is being caused. So if we move further, we'll draw the attention that the suggestions that we have made through analyzing other products that are available in market, menstrual hygiene is one of the best options that we can menstrual cup is one of the best options that we can opt for. But we can clearly see in the graph that around 50% of people had no idea or little idea about what that is. And even if they have the idea of what that is, they are not using it because of their personal restraints or preformed opinions about the product. Now, as we move forward, we have period pants, and this we can clearly see that 77.8% people had no idea or less idea of what that is. So these are potential products that can be switched back to just to reduce the impact on ecology, but people are not using it because they have preformed opinions about these. Now, as we move forward, we can clearly see there's a graph of people who actually intend to use the products. We can see that people around 32.6% people are interested in switching, but there's a vast number of people who still want to stick to the sanitary products that are not eco-friendly, that are regular sanitary napkins constituting to pollution. So what we can do here is that we can convince the women who hold interest in switching through chronological understanding and information providing. The results that we have drawn from that I have drawn from the research and the survey that were conducted after talking to people and interacting are that chronologically we can 1 second. Okay. We can chronologically start making women in urban area as well as rural area aware of this, and we can convince them to switch to this option via workshops and campaigns. Menstrual cup are cost effective and an investment for 5 to 12 years. So we can aid them with government. We can get aided from the government, as government is still promoting non-biodegradable product, that is sanitary napkins, in the rural areas. So we can actually fetch help from government and promote it in the rural areas as a scheme, because this is cost-effective options, as well as it is durable and easy to maintain, with not with causing no harm to the with causing no harm, no health hazards, as tampons cause TSS, and sanitary products, if used for longer period of time, can cause UTIs. Then we can fetch help from a gynecologist, as gynecologist is a professional. If they start suggesting menstrual cups to the patients and to the women who are consulting them, then they can lead to 30% of conversion, as we tried it on a small group of people with the help of gynecologists, and we actually convinced 30% of women to switch to menstrual cup, and the results that they were very satisfied from the use of it. We can take help of Anganwadi workers. Anganwadi workers is a network already spread all across India, and they can actually help women in rural areas to understand the usability of the product. Campaigns led by medical students can be used vitally, as they can conduct workshops in colleges, in urban and as well as rural areas, in rural areas and urban areas. And college students are likely to convert, as they are more aware of situations, and they are more open to the new options available in the market. Then we can take the right help of other people, and we can actually convince our family members or women we know to switching them, and this will create a greater impact. To conclude, paper summarizes all the aspects and form a correlation between menstrual hygiene and ecology, where we noted that 87% of women belonging to young urban India are still using products that are not biodegradable and not good for the environment. And we also concluded that 32% are willing to switch, but they are not switching because they lack information, on there's a gap between the information of usability and effectiveness that can be covered via information providing. As the survey was limited to young urban women, there are high chances that the result might vary in the rural India, because they are still, government is still trying for them to convince them to switch to sanitary napkins instead of their clothes that they use that cause them harm. So I think if the government pushes the idea of using a menstrual cup instead, the impact on ecology will be vastly reduced, and it will cause a great impact and help us improve the women health index, as well as give a really good result in terms of pollution redundancy. So in last, I want to conclude that we are dealing with a problem that shouldn't even cause a problem in the first place. Menstrual cycles are as natural as anything in this world, and the last thing they should cause is the harm to environment. Thank you.
Appreciate it, sir. A very good and a very relevant topic indeed. And I think it's a high time that somebody talked about it. And of course, women hygiene when it comes to menstrual cycle is very important. So thank you, and I really appreciate your effort here for doing so.
Thank you.
Moving on to the next participant.
Ma'am, sorry to interrupt. I have
yes.
already shared my presentation PPT.
Okay. Go ahead. Anand, right? It's Anand.
Yes, ma'am.
Right? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
His topic is becoming a housewife, social construction of the role of women in a global capitalist system.
Please share a screen.
Zulfi, share.
Yeah, sure. Okay, good evening, everyone. Myself, Anand from Jawaharlal Nehru University. This is a co-authored paper along with Srishti Mondal from IIT Delhi. And the title of my paper is Becoming a Housewife, Social Construction of the Role of Women in a Global Capitalist System. Is it visible?
Well, yeah, he's doing it. This way. Yeah, now it's visible.
Okay. So this article begins with the idea of housewifeization, borrowed from Maria Mais, to problematize the genealogy of the social construction of so-called non-working housewives whose contribution to the capitalist development are often invisibilized and rendered as shadow work. This essay illustrates how the taken for granted natural binaries needs to be deconstructed and also traces its social construction. The construction of the role of housewife is also embedded in the interplay between patriarchal social structures and the economic structures. The social construction of the dialectics of the private and the public space in the course of changing labor relations is also crucial to the legitimization of this process. However, this essay also tries to deconstruct the idea of public and private as well, focusing on instances where such distinction gets blurred. This essay attempts to analyze how becoming a housewife has less to do with one's gender, but more to do with a range of socially constructed feminine activities that both men and women partake. Next, the construction of other. Next slide, please. An essential idea in this context is that the capitalist system always needs to maintain an other outside of its structure, which serves as a space of exploitation and reinvestment in order to survive. The process of housewifeization follows the same logic, constructing the role of housewife as outside of the capitalist system, as the unpaid labor done by the housewives is not recognized as such. That legitimizes the exploitation not only by the capitalist system but also by the overarching patriarchal structure. The capitalist economy tends to view labor for the market, which brings monetary remuneration, as the only legitimate source of work. In doing so, familial and domestic work that goes into the making and reproduction of workers is ignored and is deemed as non-existent. The invention of housework itself as an unpaid form of labor took place in the course of changing labor relations during industrialization. In the course of these new developments, paid labor had moved out of the household, where it had traditionally been carried out to a large extent, into the public realm of factory or office. While wage labor were exercised mostly by men, sustaining the working men and raising the future labor force was left to their wives and daughters, thus confining them to the domestic realm. It also initiated the separation of women from the public sphere and initiated a whole debate on the private-public dichotomy. The dual system theory feminists argue that the cause of the oppression of women can be traced back to the intertwining system of patriarchy and capitalism. Heidi Hartman argues that patriarchy emerges on the one hand by controlling the sexuality and labor power of women in the public sphere, and on the other hand by imposing gender division of labor in the private sphere, the position of a woman thus being equal to that of a proletariat. Devkijan critiques the essentialist idea of how the three C's, that is cooking, cleaning, and childcare, are intricately linked to the nature of woman. Wally Sekombe portrays how the labor process is split into the domestic unit and the industrial unit, where women have been socially and discursively constructed to belong to the former and men to the latter. Sylvia Federici urges for wages for housework and also argues that it should be seen as a political perspective rather than the merely demanding for some of money. It's not only economic, because these wages may confirm unpaid work as a woman's work only, which would deny opportunities to women in the wider world. The unwaged condition of housework has reinforced the assumption that housework is not work, and therefore has prevented women from negotiating and struggling for it. Years of training and socialization go into making women to be a perfect housewife and to enable the belief that husband and children are the best thing that can happen to a woman. Has not only invisibilized housework as a form of work, but also turned the tedious housework into an act of love. And a common phenomenon in modern day India is the employment of domestic help to help the housewife perform the daily tasks. Although the domestic help receives economic remuneration for the work she performs at her employer's household, she will be expected and made to perform similar tasks within her own household, which would again be unpaid and unrecognized in nature. So, echoing Butler, the category of housewife calls for a critical genealogy of the complex institutional and discursive means through which the presupposition of the category is constituted. When we talk about the regime of inequality, while there has been a gradual feminization of the labor force and many women are advancing closer to equal payment compared to men's wages, there is still a substantial section of women who are seen as the cheapest, most docile, malleable labor force. Instead of seeing the income of women as an equal contribution to the household, it is viewed as the second salary or merely a helping hand. Next, sexual division of labor, a social construction. Next slide. Whereas the roles we each take up in a society and the beliefs and concepts which this allocation of role is based on are often taken for granted and seen as given. These are primarily the result of complicated social process through which the reality of everyday life is constructed. This also applies to the sexual division of labor. Whereas the public remained a political space with the potential for debate, social movements, and transformation, the home and the family were constructed as private and political neutral, with the role of housewife seen as natural and given. That led to the debate on personal is political. The basis for the construction of women's role as a housewife within the sexual division of labor can be attributed to the discursive power of biological determinism. It is often linked to the construction of gender as a social category. In this context, women are constructed as belonging solely to the domain of nature as opposed to the domain of culture. Sherry Ortner problematizes the dual category of nature-culture and criticizes how women's association with the nature, like childbearing and rearing activities, had led to the universal devaluation of women. It associates women with social roles which are considered to be subordinate to a man's role, which is often associated with culture and its ontological superiority over nature. Unlike the work of housewife, the work performed by the men in the labor market is seen as rational and conscious, as it is producing surplus value in the capitalist system in a more direct sense. So I will be concluding my paper with next slide, please. So housework is a socially constructed category which its meaning keeps evolving with time as well as the space in which it is enacted. The term housewife does not only denote to the wife as such, but it is used to designate those who perform housewife functions, for instance, care work or domestic help. The social construction of housewife, as theorized initially through Maria Mai's concept of housewifeization, legitimized women doing unpaid labor in the home is an essential process in developing and sustaining capitalist structure in a global dimension. The reason is the capital, which is extracted through the exploitation of women who are raising children and thus the future labor force, as well as supporting their husbands who are doing wage labor outside the home. The historical origin of this sexual division of labor was a changing mode of production and thus changing material condition with emerging industrialization. This also entailed the construction of the distinct domain of the non-political private sphere of the home and the public sphere, which is seen as the space of politics and formal labor. With changing global labor patterns, more women are entering into the workforce, often having to take up a second shift rather than leaving the role of a housewife. In many households where women have taken up employment, their roles have been taken up by specific designated women. The role of housewife has thus not disappeared, but has rather been filled with women from less privileged part of the world who are more desperate to find work and thus more vulnerable to such form of labor exploitation. Just like the process of housewifeization, this is based on socially constructed discriminating ideologies with the categories of race, class, gender intersecting in legitimizing the exploitation of women. And by excluding this work from economy, microeconomics shows a clear male bias. It is not surprising that many economists call economics a wrongly conceived discipline that is narrow, partial, and truncated. There is an urgent need to expand the purview of economics, not only for gender justice, but mainly for moving towards a realistic economies. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anand. Moving on to our next participant. It's Zaya Nakti, Saba Rashid, and Anu Singla. Is Zaya here? Zaya, Saba Rashid, and Anu Singla. Any three of them? Okay. Is Furusa Anwar here? Furusa Anwar, Hayat Fatima, and Zainab Fatima.
Yes, ma'am.
Furusa?
Present.
All right. Okay. So her topic is education and beyond, analyzing the struggles of 21st century women in a central university. Very interesting topic. Just a request, Orissa, keep your presentation within 10 minutes.
All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, we can. Yes.
All right, great.
A very good evening. This is Hayat Fatima. I close of this paper, I'll start presenting. How culture impacts gender roles in a legal Muslim university. We conducted a survey with 100 students, out of which 70 were women and 30 were men. We also interviewed political leaders active in the campus from 2012 onwards. We found that 65% of the women chose the university for its academic prowess and 38% chose it for its cultural environment. The culture plays a very significant role in the education and lives of women at a legal Muslim university. AMU to a large extent still represents the culture of Sharif families that involved segregation of women, which was implemented to ensure that women do not stray from the conventions defined by the genteel class of Muslim society in the 19th century. The first school in Aligarh, started by Sheikh Abdullah, enforced strict parda restrictions on women, which was the only reason Sharif families could send their daughters to school. Thus, by disallowing women to get influenced by the outer forces, they were made to be the carriers of culture on the pretext of saint. The first boarding house with double-walled huge fences was also constructed to prevent women's mobility and access to public spaces. Such disciplinary and restrictive life of parda inside an enclosed campus robbed girls of their childhood and forced them to mature earlier than their age. Even today, women students are expected to follow all the rules and behave as Sharif women, while the men students are recipients of a relaxed system, enjoyed hacker culture and a nightmare. Their playfulness is commended, while the playfulness of women is termed as vulgarity. Moving on to the next slide. Here we have the impact of spatial segregation on the activities of AMU women. Thus, it was the concern of safety that led to the geographical isolation of women in a legal Muslim university. Our research has led us to theorize the segregation that we will take up later. All women residential halls in the university have some degree of restrictions and curfew hours, but it is Abdullah Hall, the largest hall accommodating undergraduate students, that has the strictest rules. It is the geographical segregation that inhibits women's access to academic and non-academic spaces on campus. One of the largest libraries in Asia, Maulana Azad Library, was banned for undergraduate women students till 2014 and was relaxed only after various countries. The findings of our survey reveal that although women are allowed inside the library in theory, it is next to impossible to access the resources due to the stringent hostel restrictions and lack of cooperation from administration. Non-academic spaces include literary and cultural societies and concerts, voluntary fieldwork, or other miscellaneous activities that are privileges of male students only. The findings reveal that women attending these events beyond their curfew timings often become victims to strict disciplinary measures. When we talk of political representation, AMU at present has two student unions, AMU SU, the male-dominated union, and WCSU, Women's College Students' Union, restricted to undergraduate women's college in Abdullah Hall. There is little to no female representation in the AMU SU. This university allows equal participation of women, but women are mostly voted out of chair positions. Thus, two separate political bodies further the segregation. I would invite Guru Sanva to take over from here.
So we have used the theory of spatial segregation to analyze and understand how the limitations placed on the residents of Abdullah Hall has impacted their status and participation within the university campus. Women, in being spatially segregated, occupy a position of subservience within the university, as concluded from Henry Lefebvre's idea of social spaces. The university administration, together with the male students of the university, doubly spatially segregate women of AMU, thereby leading to their lowered status in the university campus. Women have often found themselves in the mainstream media as a vehicle to further communal politics within the nation. Not only are women of AMU identified by their religion and gender, but their association with AMU, thereby arising the issue of multilocality and multivocality, as a consequence of which female voices within the university are homogenized. Now we'll be talking about defining gender roles through women's leadership within the university. So women of AMU are often forced to choose between being a woman or a leader. The role congruity theory propounds that the expectations of gender roles from a woman don't coincide with that of a leader. The women leader of AMU have attempted to challenge this very belief by taking up positions of responsibility within the university campus. Leaders demanded for a 7-day outing in 2018 to penetrate the parent space or the main campus of the university. Now, in 2019, Women Leadership Summit was organized by Women's College Students Union in the main university campus. But the event was met with strong opposition from radical members and male radical groups within the university. The violence that followed led to the vandalization of the event by male AMU students, while the university administration remained silent. However, the event succeeded in distributing and maybe even disturbing the power balance within the university. Now we'll move on to the conclusion.
Now let's just see what were the challenges limiting and violating women's space. Firstly, through the paper, we have been able to discuss the various techniques of culture and tradition that challenges the progress of women in an institution. The primary challenge faced is homogenization of women. This uses gender as the only defining property of the student, irrespective of the diverse cultural background they come from. Homogenization then advances to ghettoization that compels women to be in a restricted geographical isolation, thus taking away the opportunity of exposure, learning, and experience. As seen in the survey results, ghettoization restricted mobility and access to the parent campus. The limited area of mobility further widens the gap between the two sections of students. A performance gap develops in terms of two genders. Males have access to all resources and opportunities, while the other is limited to what is permitted by the authorities. This leads to the preparation of an inexperienced workforce. This workforce has little or no support to avail opportunities and make full use of them. The interplaying forces create what we term as gender discrimination. The unequal treatment of men and women, the growth of women in the 21st century is still hindered in a promising space such as an educational institution. Lastly, we have something for the audience to chew on. How can the university impart the message of inclusion within the campus, and will the education of Muslim women in India be affected if AMU removes its outing restrictions? That would be all. Thank you.
Thank you, Zainab. Universities and the places of higher education are supposed to be a beacon of freedom. And if they feel like being homogenized and if they feel like ghettoization is being practiced over there, it's really a sad part. You're supposed to be they're supposed to teach you a sense of freedom. And I hope that this will be felt by the future generation. And the kind of PPT which you have presented will make a difference. I hope so. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, ma'am.
Moving on, is Zaya Dakri here now? Zaya?
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, ma'am.
All
I'm
right.
here.
Good evening. Our paper is facial study to determine gender and ethnicity using facial index among the Muslims and Banyas of Jhansi. Please go ahead.
Okay, ma'am. Sure.
You're going to share the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Are you able to do it better? Oh,
Yes,
now we
ma'am.
can.
Yes.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. I am myself Zahir Akmi and I'm from Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam Institute of Forensic Science and Criminology. My paper topic is cephalofacial study to determine the gender and ethnicity using the facial index among the Muslims and the Banyas of Jhansi district. Basically, this topic is under the field of anthropology. Anthropology is the study of man, which includes man measurements, social, cultural, physical behavior. In this paper, my paperwork, I have focused on the facial measurements of the humans. For this purpose, I have taken 4 landmarks on the face of the humans, which were Trachyon, Nasian, Nathian, and Zygion. The material methodology of this study was like for the present study on cephalofacial parameters was done on the Muslims and the Banyas of Jhansi district. For this purpose, 400 subjects were considered, aged between 18 to 45, which were originally belonging to Jhansi. In this study, we took the facial measurements of 400 individuals, out of which 200 were Banyas and 200 were Muslims. In this study, the parameters were physiognomic facial length, morphological facial length, and the width of face. By taking these measurements using the sliding caliper, we got many statistical analysis like mean, standard deviation, t-test, Pearson correlation methods. The various number of statistical analysis were done for determining the difference between the males and the females of both the population, that is Muslims and Banyas. In the study, the descriptive analysis of means, standard deviation, correlation method, and facial index were taken out of both the populations, and it was found that the facial index of Muslims and Banyas differ in their phenotypes. It was like the facial index of Muslim males were Europrosopic, and of that females were leptoprosopic. Europrosopic are the broad faces, and leptoprosopic are the long faces. Whereas on the other hand, Banyas male have the leptoprosopic facial phenotype, and the females have mesoprosopic. Leptoprosopic is the long face, and mesoprosopic is the small face. It was found that in the Jhansi populations, the Muslim males were having a broad face, and Muslim female were having a long face. And on the other hand, Banyas male were having the long face, and females were having the small and round facial phenotype. From this study, we can conclude that in cases of mass disasters, and in cases where only the bones of the human beings are found, and it is not possible to identify the body, then the anthropological measurements are taken of the bones, so that we can identify and we can determine that to which population the disease has been belonged. It is like in case any mass disaster has happened, and we have got some bones like facial bones, and and the facial bones are resemblance with these resemblance like Europrosopic, leptoprosopic area and Jhansi population. So we can identify that the person deceased must be of the Muslim population of the Bani or the Bania population according to the relation between according to the relations between these
Yes, Zaya, are you concluding?
hello.
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
So basically, the significance of this study is that we can determine firstly the gender, that either the person is male or female of both the populations, and second, the ethnicity, that the person is belonging to that particular place. Like I have done my work on Jhansi district. This was my dissertation work for my MSc. I have wholly done this work in Jhansi area, and took the measurements by myself of the 400 individuals, out of which 200 were males and 200 were females. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Our next participant is Sadka Sultan. Is Sadka here? Sadka Sultan is here. Okay. Moving on, is Isha Gotewal here? Isha?
Yes, ma'am. I am here.
All right. Our topic is subaltern urbanization. Who will speak first? Slums. Go ahead.
Is it visible, ma'am?
Yes, it's visible. Go ahead.
Okay. My topic of presentation is subaltern urbanization, voicelessness of slums women. I am Isha Gotewal. I am from Department of English, Aligarh Muslim University. This presentation goes to look at the negative impact of urbanization on slums women of our own city, Aligarh, which is made them subaltern. It is based on the field survey, including questionnaire and interview. So this study makes the project work all totally different from alternatives, as because the women and girls share their personal struggle, which they long faced and still facing in slums. So the concept of subaltern studies. This term subaltern, coined by Italian scholar Antonio Gramsci in 1980s. Initially, it was widely used to denote inferior rank in army, but nowadays the term subaltern implies people of inferior rank on the basis of their economic condition, race, gender, caste, etc. Thus, subaltern perspective is the way to understand society from the below. The subaltern studies, which emerged in India as a post-colonial theory, is about rewriting history of the people. Subaltern is a person who fits within the model of the oppressed as being so marginalized as to not even have the voice of the oppressed. Gramsci claimed that the history of the subaltern classes was just as complex as the history of the dominant classes, although the history of the latter is that which is accepted as the official history. So the objective of subaltern studies is to retake history for the underclasses whose voices had not been heard earlier. Gayatri Spivak and the subaltern theory. The concept of subaltern gained prominence with Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak's article, Can the Subaltern Speak? In Can the Subaltern Speak? Spivak propounds her theory of subalternity. The crux of her theory is that the subaltern cannot speak. So the entire concept of voice is determined by the subject, and the category of the others does not have a voice of his or her own. After the colonial rule, the subalterns were again subordinated to the elite upper class, and for the subaltern women, speaking is even more impossible. because both colonialism and patriarchy ensure that she keeps quiet. So it denounces the harm done to women. She wants to give voice to the subalterns who cannot speak or who are silent. Subaltern urbanization, subaltern experience of slums women. The idea of subaltern has entered the realm of urban studies, leading to the emergence of formation of subaltern urbanism. It is an indicator of post-colonial theory, and I am highly sympathetic to the cause of subaltern urbanism in women because it is an important correction to the silences of urban historiography and theory. These women are subjected to oppression more than subaltern men. They do not have proper representation and therefore are not able to voice their opinions or share their stories. No one is aware of the daily struggles they face. So slums women are ghosts in their own society. Examining the harsh realities of slums women. According to the field survey, the reason behind their migration is push and pull factors like poverty, insecurity, better quality of life, social dignity, etc. Violence against women in the slums is common. The women express their fears about going to toilet, and they can't even speak about at night of being harassed, violence against them, and they are illiterate, so they don't know what steps they can take against violence. In the slums area, there is always a lack of basic facilities. Despite of the initiate of Swachh Bharat mission, they have no access to this facility in their area. The unhygienic condition spread the disease like malaria, skin problem, ulcers, etc. Forced eviction is also faced by these women, and reason can be the authorities or their own family members who evicted them. Poverty is another factor. The government has started many policies like ration cards, Aadhaar cards, and loan schemes, but this is not easily accessed to them at the time of their need. So challenges faced by slums women during COVID-19. So the COVID-19 pandemic is largely concentrated in cities and urban areas, but slum dwellers will have a hard time. For women and girls who are slum dwellers, the change are even greater. They suffered immense economic losses and have struggled with their existence. They are already facing these issues, which I have discussed earlier. COVID-19 and its aftermath are only expected to worsen such outcomes and made them voiceless again. According to WHO, COVID-19 prevention guidelines, staying at home, hand washing, maintaining good hygiene, and maintain social distancing. But these slum dwellers, without access to safe hand washing and sanitation, because women and girls collect water from crowded community, which increases their exposure to the viruses. Moreover, with the school closed and no access to internet in slums, girls are hard to hit the hardest. Women and girls in slums face the double whammy of exposure to the virus, given their limited access to hygiene and each day of lost income and education. So the conclusion is, before concluding, I want to recommend some recommendations are also here. Combat violence against women in all its forms and provide effective legal and other remedies to victims of gender-based violence. States should redouble their efforts to combat violence against women, eliminating violence against women within slum communities themselves. Such enforcement should be adequately supported with the necessary human, financial, legal, technical, and other resources to assist women who are victims of gender-based violence. Invest in slum upgrading programs and housing development programs for poor, ensuring women's effective participation. Slums around the world are in desperate need of investment and upgrade. Upgrading programs should take into consideration women's immediate needs and strategic priorities, including, for example, provision of public spaces which are safe for women, provision of adequate street lighting, access to healthcare centers, schools, and child care centers. Another one is fight against women's poverty and provide economic empowerment opportunities to poor and disadvantaged women. Across the world, the feminization of poverty is a stark reality, and the poor women have enormous difficulty securing an adequate home in which to live. Global statistics show that women are affected by poverty, and inequality between men and women persist in both the economic and employment fields. In order to remedy this inequality, special efforts should be made to empower women economically and to design the projects that will allow women to access well-paying jobs, loans, and other schemes that will permit them to raise their standard of living and adequate housing. In conclusion, subordinity as a form turns into an umbrella concept which increases the scope of research from various subaltern perspectives. It is not the colonialism that silences the subaltern, but also that of those of us who are watching the oppression taking place around the world and not doing anything about it. So, to avoid heightening already, policymakers must consider the gender profiles of slums as a first step towards reflected the needs of women and girls in their respective lives. These people need to be heard, but are they heard? Can the subaltern speak? The answer is no. The subaltern cannot speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Isha. Our next participant is Ghazal Khan. Is Ghazal here? Ghazal? Is she here?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Okay. Her,
Yes, ma'am.
yeah. Her topic is Muslim widows, voiceless stories of invisible women. Ghazal, please keep it within 10 minutes, better.
Yes, ma'am, sure, ma'am. Actually, ma'am, I had a conversation with the team of Mindshare Yuva, and I have changed my topic. So my new topic is archiving widowhood and its aftershocks, a study of Muslim community in Uttar Pradesh.
Fair
Okay.
enough. Go ahead. Go ahead. You're going to share the screen, right?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, is the slide visible?
And your screen is visible. You can see the screen of either piece of the yeah, now it's go ahead.
Okay, good evening, everyone here. And I'm Ghazal Khan, and the topic of my presentation and paper is Archiving Widowhood and its Aftershocks, a study of Muslim community in Uttar Pradesh. The research paper titled Archiving Widowhood and its Aftershock explores and exposes the constant...
Is it Uttar Pradesh? Can I please interrupt? Is it Uttar Pradesh or is it a community in India?
It is in Uttar Pradesh.
It's in Uttar Pradesh. Fair. Go ahead.
Yes. Okay, I made the change later. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it explores and exposes the constant forces that molds Muslim widows into weaker, voiceless shadows, and it deconstructs the subjugation by hegemonic forces and oppressive patriarchal politics and policies that leads to oppression, exploitation of Muslim widows in the state of Uttar Pradesh. Now, we see that India has the largest widow population in the world with around 46 million widows. And this paper is based on the collected data which brought up multiple underlying problems that widows face perpetually in the Muslim community, although I must assert that other communities are no better in treating its widows. We see that most of the problems are deeply rooted in financial and religious aspects of their lives. So this paper thematically describes certain points and discusses with each of it with a case study, with an in-depth interview which was taken. So the first thing that we are going to discuss is poverty. According to the United Nations Development Programme and the Oxford Poverty, it says that every third Muslim is multi-dimensionally poor, as are 2 in 5 children under the age of 10. And this brings up the the concern of where the Muslim widows lie if the entire community is facing this multi-dimensionally poverty. So this paper archives the plight of one of the interviewee, which is Shabila Khatun, who was married at the age of 15 and is a widow of 22 years and a mother of 2. And after losing the breadwinner of the family, she started doing menial works after coming from Bengal to the area of Jivangarh in Aligarh. And she earned around 3,000 to 4,000 per month, which she said that was not enough even to feed her children, ignoring the education and other essential needs. She is a representative of most of the widows who come from financially weaker section and lose the sole breadwinner of their families. Next concern is social exclusion. Widowhood comes with denial to pleasure for widows, and Muslim community cannot be blamed for it solely. But we see that there's a restriction on food, clothing, and even participating in ceremonial events. Widows are supposed to denounce every pleasurable thing and wait to die. We see the case of Sara Begum, an old age Muslim widow from Aligarh district. On being inquired about when her husband died, she responds that it has been many years and she doesn't remember it. Now, this elucidates the kind of pain and the kinds of trauma that people go through after the death of their husband. Now, she says that it was problematic at that time when she entered widowhood, but now it is absolutely fine for her. And we see that people start living with this trauma and with this oppression, and people, and widows in particular, accept this trauma. Next, we have upbringing of children single-handedly and idda. Let me introduce what is idda. Idda is basically a waiting period that a Muslim woman observes after the death of her husband or after a divorce. So we see the case of Daraksha in the paper, who's a lower caste woman from Gorakhpur who was observing her quarantine or idda period, which is a mandatory waiting period in Islam. Now she explains us, and she becomes a representative of people who are oppressed by this customary waiting, because she tells that her husband died of dengue and left her with 3 children, 2 daughters and 1 son, and she was tortured by her mother-in-law and sister-in-law, and she was always taunted and became a subject of domestic violence as well. And while she was in dire need of money and financial assistance, idda played a role in exacerbating her condition. Now we see accusations and allegations. We see that ostracizing is always yoked with a defensive rationale to support and sustain itself. Accusations and allegations, most of which emerge from ignorance, superstitions, and hatred, play a great role in ostracizing Muslim widows. We see the case of Rashida Begum, a Muslim widow in her late 60s. She's from Gorakhpur district and she runs a house on her demised husband's pension. She has 3 daughters and 1 son. We see that after her son's marriage, he's detached himself from her. He also obtains himself from any financial help, even in the time of crisis. And a woman who has lost her husband is not just considered onerous, but the society also stamps her as promiscuous. As she tells us the incident where a regular visit from a male person is also leading people to question her character, because she has lost her male partner. Even the immediate family treats them as a burden and detaches themselves at the time when they need support and help. And even if a widow escapes physical torture, the society will never spare them of a mental or psychological one. And Rashida Begum's case is an example of it. Now we see the case of child widows. India has the highest number of child marriages and child widows. As child widows are the consequences of child marriages, the two issues must be linked and treated together. We see the case of Julie, an interview, became a widow at the age of 16. She was married when she was 10 years of age, and she could not understand the loss until she was told the way to mourn. She was sent back to her mother's house after completing her iddah, the waiting period, but she was not allowed to wear bright colored clothes or put any makeup, not even kohol. She was not allowed to wear any piece of jewelry, and stepping out of the house unnecessarily was also discouraged by the family. Now, she was uglified by the ugly norms of the society, which snatched away the femininity of a woman. Now, this is one of the many ways how a widow is oppressed. And when we talk about idda, it also pays attention to the cultural norms or religious norms which which leave no stones unturned. Now coming on to the conclusion, the interviews of Muslim widows in India from different places, caste, classes, and age groups have proved that oppressive forces of society against women are not at all biased. It treats them all the same. This work is a tangible testimony of the unheard cries, unseen tears, and unfelt pains of the Muslim widows whom the world has long forgotten. Recognition of the pain and problems can be the first attempt to eradicate their social exclusion and ghettoization. We have seen the cases of Shabila Khatun, Sara Begum, Rashida Begum, Julie, Shabnam Siddiqui, and Daraksha Khatun have 6 different stories to tell, but the pain and problems are no different. They represent the community of Muslim widows who have lost voices amidst of the noise of curses, abuses, and accusations. In a society which paints a beautiful picture of inclusion, hiding the unbeautiful actualities. Centuries later, after the abolition of sati system, no doubt the pyre has been changed, but their pain remains. The importance that they have in our society at present. We have seen that financial problems, identity crisis, humiliation, social exclusion, accusations, value in marital market, upbringing of children, deaths taken by husband, torture by in-laws, domestic violence, problem in remarriage, lack of implementation of government policy.
Have we lost her? I think we lost the connection. Zulfi, can you hear me? Am I audible to you? Am I audible to you, Zulfi?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh. I think we have lost her connection or something. She was concluding.
Hello.
I think we lost the connection.
Hello.
I can hear you. Ghazal?
Has Ghazal finished?
I think she has.
Okay.
Okay, I'm calling the next participant.
We have one person left.
Should I call the next participant? Okay.
Yeah.
Animesh Singh is here.
Oh, yes, ma'am, I'm here.
All right. Animesh has written this paper along with Sukriti Gupta, and the topic is Pati Patni or. Please go ahead.
Is my screen visible?
Let's see.
Yeah. So, hello everyone. Good evening. I'm Animesh from Computer Science and Engineering, IIT Delhi. And I'm here to present my paper called Pati Patni or Wo. So that's in Hindi, and it's called in English. It's called Husband, Wife, and Them. So I know it's a very dramatic title, but I hope by the end of the presentation you'll understand why we went with it. And as it is based on a very dramatic observation, and then data and analysis on the dramatic observation. So quickly, I'll go through the flow of this presentation. So first I'll present the idea motivation, then the flow of our actual paper that we've written, then the Google Trends data on which this paper is based, then the observations from the data, and then the analysis that we've done on that data. Now, quickly, I would also like to acknowledge the stock photos of this adorable couple I found, and I've used them throughout the presentation, so you're welcome. So the basic idea and motivation behind this paper was based on a very interesting observation that whenever you Google the name of any famous personality across the board, the first 3 to 5 top searches would always have the query related to their husband or wife. Now, as I said, it is not just political figures, but Hollywood celebrities, Bollywood celebrities, British royalty, authors, even sports personalities will have this weird observation related to their Google searches. Now, another interesting observation is that these searches are very heteronormative. So, like even for celebrities which have publicly come out as gay, people still want to know about their wives. So that is interesting. So so I'll go through the structure of our paper. The methodology that we've used is based on Franco-Moretti's cartographic perspectives of sociology, that to understand trends in sociology, you need to start from the map, and that's what we have done. So we start from data of the world, and then we move to data from India. Now, Google Trends is a data visualization tool that we've used. Is a tool that gives detailed and structured data about queries made on its search engine since 2004. So more on this later when I actually show you the graphs. And another important point, we note that this data is from Google. So, and English speaking countries, so non-Anglophone countries like Japan and Russia are not there because they do not use Google in English. China data is also not there because there is no Google in China. And also some context regarding India. So in the recent years, the amount of people with internet access and smartphone access in India has skyrocketed because of many technological, business, systemic changes, introduction of geo, etc. So that is basically the context on which this data is based. So we start with the data. So Google Trends data. So we start with data from the world. So this graph is relative interest in the search terms wife and husband from 2004 till present and on Google. So how this graph is constructed is, if you see like around 2016, here we see a peak. So that was the maximum number of hits the search term wife gathered in 2016. That number is considered as 100%, and all the other data in front of it, at the back of it, are considered relative to that. So the highest is considered 100%, and everything else is relative to that. Right? So a very clear trend we see is more interest in wife than husband. We also add partner and spouse to just like spice up the data. And then we found that still wife is the topmost searched item, then husband, partner is here and there, has some spikes, and then spouse is the least. Another interesting graph is wife and husband, the top 10 countries which are interested in these search terms. We actually have top 20 in our paper, but it is truncated for this presentation. So some interesting observations, again, you can see here is that the topmost countries are all southern Asian countries. So all from the Indian subcontinent. Our friendly neighbor Pakistan tops the list for both husband and wife. India is quite there. Wife, it's on second, and in husband it's in eighth. And then we have some African countries. And then another interesting observation we see here is countries like United States. So it's not just developing nations, it's actually even developed countries are there on this list, and people there are also interested in knowing people's wives and husbands. Then we move on to India, and we kind of see a similar trend for wife and husband. Another interesting graph from India is the top 10 states in India where these terms are searched. And very interestingly, you can see the northeastern states like Manipur, Nagaland, Mizoram, Assam, and Jammu and Kashmir, an outlier, is also present on these lists. So these are the states which, by percentage, are the highest searchers for the search terms husband and wife. And by the way, all this data is not just based on crude population, it is based on density. So it is not just like if Uttar Pradesh has the highest population, it will show that. So it is divided by the Google users in that total number of Google users in that state. So this is based on percentage of people searching. Another statistic we see for establishing context regarding these searches is the actual search query item that people use. So like very interestingly, if you'll see, this is for the world. Search queries with wife have Channing Tatum wife, Adam Levine wife, Kevin Hart wife, so celebrities wife. Whereas for husband, it is usually Instagram husband, future husband. For India, it is gift for husband, husband wife quotes. And for wife, it is Dhoni wife, Kapil Sharma wife, Honey Singh wife. So you can see a very clear distinction regarding what, why people are searching for wives and why people are searching for husbands. And it's usually, gift ideas for husbands, whereas it is Honey Singh wife. So that is an interesting observation that we found. So these were the observations. The observations were we as a society have a keen interest in knowing who someone else's spouse is. And who the public figure is married to is one of the most important details about the said public figure. And people are interested about the spouses of the public figure, and these queries are heavily gendered. So more queries for wife than husband. Then we do some analysis. Now for the analysis, so because of shortage of time, I will not go into the entire analysis, but we have discussed in the paper. But in short, a short summary is presented and substantiated, is that we present the theory of how society perceives role models, their types, there are 4, and why people want to round their characters or get closer to them in order to equalize power relations and increase their own cultural capital. So this is based on Borden and Posseron's cultural capital theory and literary Darwinism. So we've used a bunch of theories. Please, if you're interested, I recommend you please go through my paper. I promise it's not boring. And also we move on to some scope for future work. So because of the limitations of the data source we had, so we had the data source Google Trends does not show us the breakup of sex ratio, urban, rural, or the age breakup of the people actually searching for these terms. We cannot answer some questions with certainty just based on the data that we have. So hence we also propose some questions for future research that arise from the data. But we cannot explain only based on the data that we have. But these are very interesting questions, like why are the queries related to gift ideas for wife are not as common as gift ideas for husband? Why people are interested in female public figures husband, not as interested in female public figures husband as compared to male public figures wives? And also a very obvious thing is that there might be this skew because of possibility of less female people in the public sphere, or fewer females having the access to the internet. So thank you. That was my presentation, and here is our adorable couple back in the end. So thank you. I hope I incited enough interest for you to go and read my paper. Thank you so much.
Well, anyway, I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. It's indeed a very interesting paper. Very interesting. Yes, very interesting observations. I think we are over with all the participants now. Is anybody here who joined us later on and joined us late and want to present?
Ma'am,
Yes,
Singh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I have to present my paper.
Oh, your name is Palak?
Yes, ma'am.
Palak, your name is there in the list?
Yes, ma'am.
What's the topic?
Ma'am, feminist epistemology, deconstruction and reconstruction of knowledge.
Okay, but your name is not there in the list. So Zulfi, yes.
Ma'am, actually that paper was transferred from sociology to gender studies later on, so it was added after that. So
you want her to, okay, we'll allow you, Beta Palak, but keep it within 10 minutes, okay?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
All right,
Can I share my screen?
Yeah, you go ahead. I hope there is no more surprise addition, Zulfi.
No, she's the last one, I think.
All right. Okay.
Is my screen visible, ma'am?
Yes, we can see the, yeah. Go ahead.
Man is defined as a human being and woman as a female. Whenever she behaves as a human being, she is said to imitate the male. One is not born, but rather becomes a woman. These are the famous words of the French philosopher Simone de Beauvoir. Good evening to one and all present here. This is Palak Singh presenting on the paper Feminist Epistemology, Deconstruction and Reconstruction of Knowledge. Now, in this paper, I have analyzed the tensions between the traditional and classical notions of knowledge production and the new emergent epistemologies, and how the later fill in the lacunae in the former, and the quest to arrive at a conciliatory picture between them both through the lens of various positions in feminist epistemologies. First of all, I would like to explain what epistemology is. This term is more of a part of philosophical jargon. The term is the process. The epistemology is the process of production of knowledge, and it is concerned with questions such as where knowledge comes from, who can be a knower. Now, in this question, who can be a knower, while we discuss feminist epistemologies, more questions arise, such as can women be subjects of knowledge, or its creators or the agents? What can be known? Can subjective truths and feelings count as knowledge? And how much confidence we can have in the knowledge generated? Now, epistemic injustice. Epistemic injustice occurs when there's the process of othering of females. Anand had very analytically described this process in his paper and how it takes place within the global capitalistic system. The othering clearly manifests itself in the production of knowledge, even if this knowledge claims to be based on the principles of scientific inquiry, rationalism, and objectivity, which are supposed to be neutral and claim to be unbiased. The epistemic injustice is what is sought to be deconstructed and uncovered by feminist epistemology to make space for more inclusive and comprehensive theories of knowledge, which include women whose voices have been systematically dissected from traditional knowledge formation. Now, there's a very famous quote by who's known as the father of political science, Aristotle. The female is a female by the virtue of a certain lack of qualities. Now, this tradition of relegating the females to a subjugatory positions does not end by Aristotle. It perpetuates, and we can see a clear strain coming through even to the present times. Like we can take St. Thomas, for example, or Rousseau, for example, and even in modern times, there are people like Sartre who are like questioned on the basis of the philosophy, which somehow excludes women from the agency of knowledge formation. Now, knowledge is a process. Feminist epistemology aim to deconstruct the dislocated objectivity and rationality. The feminist epistemology argues that in traditional epistemology, the language is the language of dualism and bivalence. It creates binaries between the master-slave mentality and the stable and precarious, the core and peripheral. Rationality itself becomes an inflexible, rigorous, impersonal stance which involves competing of one discovered objectivity with other supposedly scientific ideas arising out of reason, and thus forming the standard of what knowledge is, and becomes inextricably intertwined with the issues of men's gender identities. Traditional epistemological derivations. Now, these are the derivations which we can see in every sphere of our lives in our society, whether academic, political, social, economic. For example, males are rational while females are emotional. STEM is for boys and perhaps home science or arts is for girls. Boys become engineers and girls are more perfectly suited for supposedly soft professions like teaching or caretaking or nursing. And male are active, rational, superior, and female passive, emotional, and inferior. Now, why did the need for deconstruction of traditional epistemologies arise? The female epistemologists have argued that traditional epistemology has excluded the possibility that females should be the knower or agents of knowledge, and claims that voice of science is a masculine one, that history is written from the only point of view of men, his story, not her story. And in addition, traditional feminist epistemology only gives primacy to domination of patriarchy without seriously addressing the differences based on race, ethnicity, gender, and class. Why is the need for reconstruction of this knowledge? Excluding the females from epistemic inquiry has been done by traditional epistemology for the longest time, denying the females the epistemic authority, belittling their feminine cognitive styles and modes of knowledge, producing theories of women that represent them as inferior, deviant, or significant only in the ways that serve male interest, producing theories of social phenomena that render women's activities and interests or gendered power relations invisible, and producing knowledge in science and technology that is not useful for people in subordinate positions or that reinforces gender and other social hierarchies. Engendered knowledge. Now, this sounds very close to endangered knowledge, which is what it becomes when we exclude a large share of society from outside the domain of producing knowledge. Reason in the gendered metaphor producing the dualistic oppositional and hierarchical binaries. For example, men, women, reason, emotion, mind, body, public, private. Now we can see clearly how these binaries are assigned to each of the sexes. Despite its classical antecedents and as in the ideal of disinterested inquiry, the ideal of dispassionate inquiry is an impossible dream, but a dream nonetheless, or perhaps a myth that has exerted enormous influence on Western epistemology. Like all myths, it is a form of ideology that fulfills certain social and political functions, as the philosopher Jagger has aptly described the process. Now, this engendered knowledge excludes the experiential knowledge. Everyday emotional, subjective, and associated with women is dismissed. Mainstream knowledge has been used to control women, and feminist knowledge is an aid to the emancipation of women. Haraway has reconceptualizes the idea of objectivity as situated or positioned knowledge. To her, feminist objectivity means quite simply situated knowledges. Claims of feminist epistemology.
Palak, is my request. Can you?
Yes, ma'am. I'm coming close.
All right.
Feminist epistemology grounds and starts from women's experiences. Recognition of females as distinct producers of knowledge and not simply as objects about whom knowledge might be produced. Women's experience as foundation of feminist epistemology. They argue that inclusive vision is required as subjectivity is multidimensional. And they have argued that there has to be a approach which makes a difference in science rather than a different science altogether. Concludingly, I would say that feminist epistemology has furthered attempts in quest for social justice, has helped refute the unfounded claims about women's nature and essences, which are often found in inscriptions of culture and various ideological myths, have tried to unveil and identify the deep-rooted androcentrism and staggering bias in favor of myriad concepts, methods, and theories, and have works for unveiling the biases which obstruct women's mobility and full participation as a meaningful human life, and a quest to make a more inclusive, comprehensive space for knowledge formation. I would like to end by saying feminist epistemology has already become an important critical tool in many disciplines, but there's a long, long way to go, many promises to keep, and miles to go before the topic of feminism and demand for equality of sexes can go to sleep. Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you, Palak. Okay, I think we have come to an end to this session. Zulfi, there are no more additions. So now in the summing up session, I have a small presentation. Then I will request Vinod Chandra sir to sum up, and then Rakesh Chandra sir. Sir, is it okay? Can we do this in this one? Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. Vinod Chandra sir, you can hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you.
All right. Okay. So, Zulfi, can I have my presentation, please? In my presentation, basically, they're summing up as we have been listening to all these the young girls and boys, and they were expressing their opinions regarding male and female, and various, they had a lot of, I could see they had a lot of curiosity and anger, and even so their emotions were playing high when they were talking about the slum dwellers, or when they were talking about the maids, or when they were talking about the plight of the women in India, which is a fact. But from where does this gender sensation, where does this knowledge of gender comes from? So can I have a slide, please? The next slide. See, gender and sex is as it's here. Summing up is basically the gender is basically nothing but as you can see over here, it's nothing but a personal attribute or a social role or a social custom. Whereas the sex is more a biological thing, it's a simplest term, if you put. But why is it so important? Why this session becomes so important? Because there are so many participants who have expressed their opinions about the discrimination that's going on, the blatant discrimination between men and women when it comes to marriage, or let's say when it comes to relationships, the rape and the menstrual cycle and all that. But adolescence has a very important role to play when we actually, portray the society. So during early to mid adolescence, youth start understanding gender. And no one actually, when the child is born, the child has no idea apparently what is the gender role or what are the personal attributes or what the society expects that child to behave in a society, to behave in the society. Can I have a next slide? But yeah, but these are very important. What can we say? These are very important relations which keep reminding us that this is the gender role you're supposed to play. So mother, grandmothers, aunts, and old sisters and friends will always tend to, tell teen girls as to behave ladylike. Now, what does that supposed to mean? You can't. When the girls, laugh loudly, they say, "Please don't laugh so loudly. You're supposed to be a ladylike." So that girl learns that behavior, and she starts imitating that behavior which is expected of her. Earlier, as I said, during the childhood, the child has no idea what are the expectations of society from that child, what gender role specifically they are supposed to play. So what I'm trying to say here is gender is just a societal construction. We can not do away with the sex. Sex is a biological thing, but we can do away with the gender stereotyping. So as a result, the young teen, as I come back, starts giggling in a stereotypical as a way of feminine laugh. Now she understands what the society expects of her. Next slide. Where does this come from? These kind of things. So there are two theories which I have focused upon specifically. Can I have next slide? And that is basically a societal cognitive theory, social cognitive theory, that which was actually given by Bandura. It was a very 1980s phenomenon. And in this thing, he very categorically pointed out that what happens is that the gender sensation or the realization that you're supposed to behave in one way or the other comes through imitation. This was because he was an observational psychologist and he was a little different from the behavioralist. So he said that what happens is that people learn through observation. So when you see that somebody is, and he has taken three basically model of causation, that is behavior and person and environment. That is all these three things plays a very important role. And when a person sees somebody getting punished for some kind of a behavior, then what happens is that as soon as they see that this particular type of a behavior will be punished by the society, they stop doing that. So this is a learning process which actually happens through observation and imitation. That was what Bandura said, and that's what we generally see in this in our society also. Because if you are not going to, behave in a certain way, there are a lot of adjectives that have been discussed here. There are a lot of adjectives that are waiting for, specifically for female, and why those adjectives are associated specifically with female, because probably she's not adhering to what the society has decided for, and she has not learned from the observed the behavior or the punishment which the person gets if they deviate from that behavior. So next, after social cognitive developmental theory of Kohlberg is very important. This is one of the most important theory in recent psychological field, because this talks about how adolescents can get messed up if you don't if the parents don't pay attention to what they are actually doing and how they are behaving in front of the children. So adolescence is what I'm trying to say here is a very important time period, specifically for children, because they are observing their parents and the surroundings, and they are learning from their environment. Next slide. And as a result, Kohlberg has actually pointed out that there are certain stages of gender. The gender labeling, in which the children actually can start identifying themselves and other people as girls or boys. Now, how do they do this? They, however, seen as stable as is written over here, over time or across changes in superficial physical characteristics. So labeling, they start understanding, what's the distinction, how they are supposed to behave, and then gender stability, that's the second stage. Children recognize that gender is stable over time, and boys and girls, and boys will grow up to be a daddies, and girls will grow up to be a mummies. However, the unchanging nature of the gender. So next. And of course, space is gender consistent. The children have a full appreciation of the permanence of a gender over time. Now, see, in the early adolescence age, what happens is you must have seen that teenagers are very sensitive to any changes you actually suggest them. Because at that time, they are sticking to the stereotype, trying to find their identity, trying to learn from their environment. That is why they have a very, very stereotype behavior of the gender. They start behaving in a very stereotyped way, which is expected of them in society. In the later part of their lives, what happens is they start, understanding that this was not necessary, and probably there is a space to vary it always. So by the age of around 3 years, as mentioned, the gender labeling stage, children, become able to label themselves. And others as boys or girls segregated. And it's not for another couple of years, however, that children are taught to enter the gender stability stage. Next slide. So this is the basically summation. And what I wanted to say here is that whatever you are trying to do or trying to communicate with your children at the adolescence age is very important. If you are denying or if you are denying some particular behavior to a particular sex due to a sexual orientation, that will take up and that can really mess up a child, and because that child is observing you very closely, and it may scar the child forever, because some children are really sensitive to it. So instead of telling them to behave in a certain way as the gender stereotyping, I think we should go ahead and start practicing gender neutrality. As even somebody was talking about epistemology, we should stop doing that. And लड़का और लड़की एक जैसे हैं या एक समान हैं, इसको हम अगर practice में लाएंगे, so I think we can solve many problems. Thank you. Now I would like to invite Vinod Chandra sir. Sir, please go ahead. Yes. Please unmute yourself, sir. Unmute yourself. Sir. Yes. Thank you. Yes. Now we can hear you. Thank you.
I mean, I don't have anything to remark on your, contribution, because the way you have conceptualized the gender and the construction of gender among the adolescents is really impressive in a way that you referred to basically two models, and the cognitive and this developmental model and theory. And yes, I don't know, Amrita, are you from the field of psychology?
Sir, I'm actually in the economics department, but very much interested in behavioral sciences. Yes, sir.
So you are from the economics?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So it's a blend of disciplines in your paper, I can see.
Yes.
But it is interesting, and I see that Professor Rakesh Chandra is here. And before Rakesh Chandra, I suppose that Rakesh ji is the best person to remark on the gender construction in a philosophical and in sociological terms. But the way you have presented your views on adolescent and gender construction is really good. And rest of the things means if I see, because I joined this presentation session late, and I heard some of the presenters who have already submitted their papers, and I reviewed and I read their papers, and that is a really interesting one. And the last paper, the Palak's paper, was came actually. That paper came very late to me, but I enjoyed reading on epistemological discourses on feminism and feminist debate, and that was interesting, and it was a very good attempt by Palak. And similarly, Isha's Isha's paper was also very good, and a few more paper, because I don't have the list right now before me, because I wasn't prepared to speak, but I was prepared to listen most of the speakers, and I find interesting. And there are some remarks to for few speakers only, but overall presentations were good. I mean, people, the students have improved their quality when they submitted their paper initially, and when they took the what I say, I mean the workshop on abstract writing, then how they have to develop the paper. So over the last 1 month or so, I mean probably 6 weeks, they have been working on their paper continuously to improve it. And to best of my understanding, some of the papers became excellent and very good papers, and some of the papers are average. Those were some of the paper we have received which were not up to the standard for publication, so we dropped out those papers. But I encourage almost every presenter here, and that's my I mean a word for all the presenters. And I would like to hear Professor Rakesh Chandra's remark on these gender constructions, particularly because Rakesh ji is more expert than me. And after listening Rakesh ji, I may add, or if you please invite Professor Rakesh Chandra on
Yes, sure.
for comments on these papers, I think it would be much better.
Yes, thank you. So now I invite Professor Rakesh Chandra, sir. So can you hear me? All right. Yes. Please
Good
go ahead.
evening. Good evening. Thank you
Good
very
evening.
much. Firstly and foremost, I must congratulate the organizers of this very, very interesting research summit, or conclave, as I could say. I had also, as Dr. Vinod mentioned, had the opportunity of reading many of these papers. The papers that I got at that time were in a very large number and very diverse. Many of them had been worked out in great detail, papers in anthropology, papers in science, and some of them were like essays. But it was delightful to see that the amount of enthusiasm that people have put in terms of writing proper papers with proper references. And I must once again congratulate Zulfi and his team for this absolutely fantastic effort. When it comes to today's presentations, I think, including yours, are you in fact in the race?
No, no.
Will you be judged? Will you be judged or not?
So you can judge. See, we are always, that door is always open, ready to be judged.
No. In terms of getting the prize money.
No. No, I can see in IT college. Not allowed in that way.
Okay. So I have just a few remarks. Very enthused by the participants and their work. And also a little saddened by the fact that women's studies, which was, or gender studies as it later grew into, has also become an orthodoxy. And I was really very sad that now everybody in this subject also was using the same references with the same kind of orthodoxy, of the same kind of scholarship, quoting them with the same kind of a thing against which this subject had actually emerged. So always, and I don't at all blame these children. I blame myself and teachers like Vinod and myself, who have for the past 20 years been associated with this subject in India. But let me come to some specifics very quickly. I really liked the paper of all the papers, but let me have one or two short comments on each one of them. Seher's paper, which I think, where she took the subaltern view, I think needs to be looked at again, because she takes a very general view. And two things which I would suggest to her. One, particularly if I am not mistaken, it is the volume 4 or 5, the introduction of the subaltern studies, where the subaltern is defined as the subversive. We need to distinguish the oppressed people from the idea of the subaltern. All oppressed people in the old Marxian framework would be considered to be the proletariat. But only the ones who rise up in protest will become the subaltern. So when you look at Mahashweta Devi's Draupadi, she is a subaltern because she rises up in protest. While all other Dhinu, Ghasya, Dhania, etc. in Premchand, who accept their lot as the oppressed, will not be called subaltern. So the subaltern studies and the Marxian framework have an important difference. And that, I think, needs to be explored. The whole question of can the subaltern speak also needs a reconsideration, because the question was that when the subaltern speaks, does he then remain a subaltern? It's not a question of can he speak or not. But once having spoken, does he remain the subaltern, or now he has become the subversive and come on his own? So that's the kind of a thing. And I would advise Seher particularly to look at, when she is writing about the maids and the others, to look at the writings of Ismat Chughtai and some of those writings where the domestic scene, the relationship of the maid and the lord and the other women of the house is very, very humorously, but very, very radically examined. And I think that would be useful for her. Muda Tariq's paper on media analysis, again, I think needs a little more work, because one, it takes very theoretical frameworks. It takes the view, of course, which is a correct view, that actually the serials generally take on the traditional woman's role as the housewife. But then she does not take the correct media analysis posture, which is to understand media, especially the media as it exists right now, as a commercial media. It is called a soap opera because it is actually the advertising companies which are selling us the stories. So the advertising company is actually wanting to sell a soap or a musical instrument or a tractor or a car. And they are telling a story not because they want to educate us, but because they want to sell a product. So they are selling a product and telling a story, not telling a story and selling a product. And this analysis of media understanding requires to be carefully understood before we start making our comments. Calendula's paper, I don't know whether I'm pronouncing it right. Again, it's a very interesting paper on looking at the relationship of liberalization, patriarchy, and her idea is to look at a more sensitive society, especially in terms of for marital rape and the others. But I think what she missed out was a very important, she only took the legal view. She did not take the issue of excessive porn being available now, and the kind of demands which men are making on women these days, and the kind of things which have happened because of the open skies and creating terrible problems for the women. The issue is very important, and she took a very sensitive issue, and I congratulate her for that. Sahiba's paper on, again, the menstrual hygiene question, I think needs a little more analysis. 87% of what number? When 71% of the adolescent girls and women do not use tampons or any other things, then 87% of what? And also, I think she needs to get a little realistic in the fact that the whole menstrual hygiene campaign by UNESCO is actually also sponsored or supported by Whisper. So the critique has to be, one, more well substantiated and also more radical. Anand's paper on the idea of is, again, I really wonder about the categories being used, that this one is a social construction, because what I wonder is that we have so often used the idea of social construction and expanded it to an extent that actually nothing is left out of it. So are we saying that there is a social construction and there is a non-social construction? So what is the non-social construction? That I think needs to be seen. And the whole idea that it is all part of the capitalist scenario is also, I think, needs to be reconsidered, because the idea of the housewife and the idea of the polis and the public debate, the polis and the private oikia debate exists much before the capitalist economy in Plato himself. And the other idea that being a housewife, a Graha Lakshmi, is also a luxury. So the construction of the housewife is actually, of course, very, very limiting. But on the other hand, the idea of the housewife is also very liberating for many women who would like to go back to their homes and feel a sense of ownership. So we need to use categories more carefully. And the public-private pre-industrial society thing, I think, is very, very important. Just because we read papers, we say that, oh, it's a capitalist economy, we start forgetting that the feudal economy and the pre-feudal economies also exactly had, in much worse forms, the division of gender roles. I am extremely happy at Zainab's paper, which is brilliant, completely free of intellectual biases, does not take over theoretical frameworks, does an absolutely honest, fearless examination, and puts the views absolutely in their perspective. So Zainab, I think you need to be congratulated, and you and your, I think there were 3 authors, all of you. Very, very brilliant. Zahia's paper, again, is a close anthropological paper. All of us from the gender perspective can feel a little worried about the essentialism which there is, that Muslim women have heads like these and Baniya women have heads like these, because it smells of a certain kind of essentialism. But we can't deny the fact, and there is a very, very special sense in which anthropology needs to be looked at from the perspective of all the politically correct viewpoints that we represent. But the paper is a close reading, very well researched and very well formulated. Aisha's paper on subaltern, again, I think had the same kind of a difficulty, a very nice paper, but who are you calling the subaltern? And this whole representation of the subaltern, I think, needs reconsiderations. Ghazal Khan's paper on widowhood is a very important paper. I wish she could actually subsequently also look at the various shades of the experience of widowhood in the upper class Muslim family, the middle class family, and in the lower class. In my own understanding and my reading, I have found that as compared to widows of same class, remarriage in some of the Muslim folds is easier than in the case of the similar Hindu family. But that might be, again, needs some substantiation. Animesh Singh had one very smart paper, which can look peripheral, but I think it's a very interesting kind of thing, which looks at how the modern people still look for locatability of celebrities and others with respect to their husbands and wives. Why do they do so? How do they do so? Requires a little more systemic understanding. But I think it's a very, very interesting kind of a study which says that across classes, with the use of technology and without the use of technology, social behavior doesn't really change. Palak's paper is, again, I think a very good paper, very well worked out paper. But I feel very sad when people do not really, I think I would be advising her to look at the meaning of epistemology in terms of the sources of knowledge, the validity of knowledge question, and the whole analytical philosophical view about philosophy needs to be reconsidered, because what she has taken is entirely a phenomenological and an existential view. The idea of calling history his story is factually incorrect. It comes from historia, which means finding out. But since it's a clever pun, people keep on using that. Palak's paper is well substantiated with the kind of reading that she has done. It's a very good paper. Dr. Marwaha's paper, of course, is a very, very nice paper, very well worked out. I have personally also worked on adolescence and gender, and I find it very difficult that because of the most of the scholarship that we have is on the American adolescents. There is very little adolescent study in India, and the experience of the like in the American adolescent, they say that the young, early adolescents, children start being with them, their own batch, and they do not mix with the rest. In India, because of the sex segregation, the girls are in fact locked in, and therefore the kind of peer bonding, etc., which does happen across in the other places does not happen over there, because there is an alienation of generations in the West. Here, it does not really happen in the same way. And I find that, some of the adolescent experiences given by from the Dalit girls' perspective are beautifully represented in Urmila Pawar, particularly Ayadan. And since you are working on that, you would be very delighted to see that how she sees that humiliation of the girl by boys, humiliation of caste is also taken care of by the bonding that girls have with each other. So how there are humiliations and how there are techniques of editing out and responding, laughing it away, which happens between those things. So it's not necessarily always a bitter kind of a gash-making humiliation which remains with them. And that, I think, is a little different from the kind of experience which we find when you read the writings of the Black feminists, particularly Bell Hooks and the others, where humiliation is so profound, so violent, and so completely damaging that there is no possibility of recovering. But there again, sisterhood is powerful, has worked. And here also, I think. So those are issues which we as scholars and activists, or whatever you may call, have been struggling for years. So it has been a delight listening to all these young people and their scholarship. I wish them all very well. And I was asked to also say that what is the paper that I enjoyed most? Then, as I said, I really enjoyed Zainab Fatima and her colleague's paper the most, because I think it was one of most uninhibited intellectual piece. And I
very
really
liberating paper.
I really wish them all the best. Thank you very much. And I am delighted to be here late in the day. I have been on heavy medicine from yesterday because of a terrible earache and fever. But so I've been trying to keep myself awake and listening to all of these young people. Thank you very much, Zulfi and Dr. Marwaha, for giving me this opportunity. And I wish all these young scholars a very, very bright, fulfilling academic career. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate it that you have, despite your ill health, you are here and spending time with us. And because these students really appreciate your presence. Thank you for gracing the occasion, sir. Thank you. Vinod Chandra, sir, would you like to add something? As you said, you'll be adding in the end.
No, I think Professor Chandra has already spoken well, because whatever I was supposed to say, in particular to few papers, he has already given, particularly on the subaltern issues. There are two papers, what he mentioned. Looking at the level of the students, I was not very, hard to say, but Professor Chandra very rightly said, I subscribe his, the argument, and I agree with him that in some of the papers, but on, I really appreciate the students' effort, and I'm really pleased to tell that few of the papers which engages the anthropological data set is really very good, and I enjoyed reading the Muslim widows, and I tried her level best to improve, because the moment when I received initially that paper, I suggested many things, and she developed her writings of very different narratives, and he draws certain arguments, which is really a good art of picking up the themes through narratives. And this is what we were trying to develop among the students, that how to write the paper. Of course, the scholarship level, the question of scholarship is altogether different. But the question of writing the paper, because this whole workshop was, or the whole conclave was to how, I mean, to train the students, or to train encourage students how to write the scholarly papers in journals, because probably Professor Chandra will agree with this fact that right now many of the teachers, even the young scholars, are writing very ruthlessly, and I mean the way they are contributing paper is really cut and paste and all those things. But here I'm really pleased that through this Mindshare Yuva conclave, at least some of the students have developed their own data sets, and through that data sets they have tried to develop an argument. That was the purpose. And whatever the studies we have received in some empirical data set is really good. As I told you, that there were many papers which were average on data set, which I have already remarked in person to each and every author. And here, this is the time where we need to encourage everyone. And Professor Chandra is right to say that big congratulations to all the participants in this competition. And please carry on and develop yourself through such kind of participation. And I also appreciate the Mindshare team as well, that they have taken up this initiative, which was expected from the university centers, and Mindshare people are really deserve a rich thanks to all of us, that they have given this platform to this research students, and also a platform to us to read different kind of papers in this platform. So thank you very much, Julfi and Dr. Marwa and Professor Chandra, that we all work together and learn many things through these papers as well. And this is a kind of joint exercise, and many congratulations for each participant here, those who are present here and those who haven't got the chance to present. Even for those students or those participants, I wish all the best for their future career. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, I request you to choose the best paper. You were late, but I think we have taken the call from Rakesh Chandra, sir. But
Rakesh ji is agar available ho, to I think he, because हमने 4 to 5 papers initially I missed out the presentation, but I have already given some my judgments. If you see the best 5 papers,
yes.
I don't know whether just
No, sir. There's no need to disclose as of now. So that is for the final day. So this one is for the presentation that we have seen today. So for every conclave, we are giving best presentation prize of 1100 rupees cash prize to all.
So we have to choose only one, or 1, 2, 3.
That is okay. You can choose. You can choose as many. That is up to you. Like Rakesh Chandra sir has given his call. You can choose.
It depends that how many prizes you have got. I mean, because for a judge, it is very difficult to give the number of Professor Rakesh ji and me.
Mindshare
and
is always unlimited.
So looking at the the way of presentation, definitely that paper which was on the menstrual hygiene was the good presentation style, I can say. If we see the presentation and the level of confidence and what else? Rakesh ji, please. Rakesh ji, please help me out to find out one more name.
I had recommended Zainab's paper, the one on Aligarh Muslim University.
Yeah, that was interesting. Yeah, and I recommend that paper which was on this menstrual hygiene.
Yeah, that was a nice paper, right?
Yeah. So the two papers, if we, Zulfi, if you agree, these we both will agree on these two papers for the best presentation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wait
Thank
a minute,
you.
sir. So please, I request Dr. Rakesh Chandra sir to give final remarks, and before we end up the
So
session,
there is
we'll share a slide.
There is no.
राकेश जी छोड़ेंगे नहीं ये आप प्लीज आप फाइनल रिमार्क दीजिए
Give me, sir, give me 2 minutes to make a slide actually.
Okay.
Okay.
Zulfi, can you hear me? Zulfi, can you hear me?
Yes, please speak for 2 minutes, and after that I'll share a slide.
Okay. What I only want to, if at all,
Speaker
you're still
has,
hearing.
sir has already summarized beautifully. So, if you don't mind, Zulfi, can I leave now because I have some very urgent things to attend. Is it
Wait
okay
a
with
minute.
you?
Wait for a minute, ma'am. It's over. It's okay. Wait.
I'm there. Okay. Okay.
So the first prize, we have selected two people. One, Zainab Fatima, and the other one is this one.
Give a clap to Zainab.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Many congratulations, Zainab. Very nice paper, indeed.
And the second one is Sahiba Khan.
Congratulations to Sahib.
Yes.
So thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have today we ended up with the second conclave. We have total of 8 conclaves. So tomorrow is a gap, and on day after tomorrow we'll have 2 sessions. One on science and technology, and another one on peace and justice. Which will be the papers related to law will be presented there. So see you again on the science and society session. Dr. Vinod sir and Rakesh Chandra sir.
Thank you.
And thanks. I would like to thank 2 people very much because Professor Vinod Chandra sir has given much time. सबसे ज़्यादा उन्होंने वक्त दिया और he has reviewed the most papers and helped us in improving most of the papers. And still he is working on it. And his experiences in being a member of a board of editors in many journals have helped us a lot. So we'll be in touch, sir. And thanks a
Yes,
lot.
thank you. Thank you,
Thank you,
Zulfi.
thank you, Rakesh Chandra sir, for reviewing all the papers and summing up in such a nice way. And Amita ma'am for her constant support.
Thank you, Zulfi. Appreciate it. It's a very nice endeavor, and I wish best of luck to all the participants. They have done a tremendous job. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Vinod Chandra sir. So can we go now?